Ever since the inauguration, there has been a whirlwind of extremely cruel and incompetent deportations. The signing of the Alien and Enemies Act has expanded Trump's reach and upped the cruelty factor. Have been disappeared and sent to ICE detention centers all over the country, with some being sent to Guantanamo Bay and now CECOT in El Salvador, a terrorism detention center that is known for human rights abuses. The ACLU recently got a hold of ICE's Alien and Enemies Act violation guide, and the criteria for being considered a member of Tren de Aragua is as simple as being a Venezuelan who wears a Michael Jordan jersey and has tattoos. This is the Alien and Enemies Act Alien Enemy Validation Guide, and it has some check boxes. They have to be a citizen of Venezuela and over 14, and not a citizen of the United States or lawful permanent resident, which, depending on the day, changes in the administration. They have revoked laws that previously made a lot of these people permanent residents. This guide also has a checklist and point system. So if they figure out that you are a Venezuelan who's over 14, they look at other factors, including tattoos, the clothes you're wearing, people that you have texted. Aaron Rachlin Melnick has been following this story really closely, and he did a great thread about it. This part talks about your associations with people. Imagine a guy's roommate is someone ICE says is a TDA member. 2 points for residing with him, 2 points for closely associating with him, 2 points for being in a group photo, 2 points for social media posts with him. 8 points equals sent to prison in El Salvador. They can arbitrarily decide that your roommate or your cousin or your coworker is a member of Tren de Aragua, and if you have spent any significant time talking to or with that person, they could send you to El Salvador as well, if you are Venezuelan and over 14. This last bit I want to show you from the ICE guide talks about clothing and additional identifiers. So some of the things that could get you thrown to an El Salvadorian prison camp are dressing in high-end urban streetwear, favoring the Chicago Bulls basketball jerseys, specifically Michael Jordan jerseys with the number 23, and Jordan Jumpman footwear, sneakers, and or often wear sports attire from U.S. professional sports teams. It's not about have you committed a crime, have you been accused of a crime, it's are you wearing a Michael Jordan jersey? Trump claimed on the campaign trail, and a lot of people believed him, that he was going to go after criminals, but what he didn't explicitly say on the trail, even though it was obvious, is that he views anyone who doesn't bow down to him as a criminal. Attorney General and Trump and Elon Musk are even threatening to lock up people for 20 years and potentially send them to El Salvador because they protested Tesla. This isn't just having an impact on people living in the United States. The European countries and Canada have begun issuing travel advisories against the U.S. This is from an NPR article. Some European countries and Canada issue advisories for travelers to the U.S. And of course, MAGA hates NPR, and just this week, the GOP was holding a hearing trying to decide whether they should defund NPR and PBS. Not only is this having human impacts on human lives, it's having economic impacts. Our rates of tourism have dropped significantly since Donald Trump has come into office. And his attacks on Canada have basically halted all travel from Canada. Not just because of his vile rhetoric, but because Canadian, British, and German tourists have all been arrested and detained in the U.S. under false charges.
Intended as a short vacation turned into a nightmare. German tourist Lukas Silaf was detained upon arrival in the US and hauled into a detention facility.
They put me in chains everywhere, around my stomach, on my hands, my feet. Then they put me in a van and drove me to the detention center in Satinko.
Lucas was returning to the U.S. from a vacation in Mexico. He says he had a valid U.S. tourist visa, but ended up spending 16 days in detention before being allowed to return to Germany. And his arrest is part of an apparent trend involving temporary visa holders and visitors being detained by U.S. border officials on their way into the country. Canadian actress Jasmine Mooney has a similar story. She was detained for 12 days over an incomplete visa.
There was no heads up. Next thing you know, I'm taken and for 2 weeks haven't been told anything, moved in different cells, sleeping on cement, sleeping in different jail cells. Like, it just, nothing makes sense to me.
That clip was from DW, a German international broadcaster. I highly recommend watching some news about the US from outside perspectives. DW has a lot of great documentaries about how messed up the US is, too. W also mentioned the scientists who have been denied entry.
A French scientist, in turn, was denied entry into the US after his phone was searched by customs. Officials at the airport found messages criticizing the Trump administration's cuts to science programs. All deportees say they did not violate US immigration policies nor commit any crimes.
French scientist was detained and deported because of things he had said on his social media, and immigration agents looked at his phone at the airport. And with that knowledge, immigration lawyers are now beginning to advise their people, their clients, to scrub their phones and social media.
Immigration attorneys have now begun advising people to ensure their social media profiles are free of criticism of the US administration to increase their chances of entering the country.
Trump's cruelty here is beyond comprehension. That Canadian actress Jasmine Mooney shared her experience in a Guardian article. She was detained by police at an immigration center and was handcuffed and bussed off to an ICE detention center. She was detained for 2 weeks, and she spoke in her article about how she was able to leave because she has access and money and she got media attention. But there were lots of women there who have none of that. I met a family of 3 who had been living in the U.S. for 11 years with work authorizations. They paid taxes and were waiting for their green cards. Every year, the mother had to undergo a background check, but this time she was told to bring her whole family. When they arrived, they were taken into custody and told their status would now be processed from within the detention center. Another woman from Canada had been living in the U.S. with her husband, who was detained after a traffic stop. She admitted she had overstayed her visa and accepted that she would be deported, but she had been stuck in the system for almost 6 weeks because she hadn't had her passport. Who runs casual errands with their passports? I highly recommend reading that article. It is horrific and will last as a stain on this nation. More light has been shed on the men who were deported to the El Salvadorian prison camp the past couple of days as well, or past couple of weeks at this point. A photojournalist for The Times was there when the men got off the planes, and he shared his experience in an article well worth reading. What the Venezuelans Deported to El Salvador Experienced by Philip Halsinger. The intake began with slaps. One young man sobbed when a guard pushed him to the floor. He said, "I'm not a gang member. I'm gay. I'm a barber." I believed him, but maybe it's only because he didn't look like what I had expected. He wasn't a tattooed monster. The men were pulled from the buses so fast the guards couldn't keep pace. Chained at their ankles and wrists, they stumbled and fell, some guards falling to the ground with them. With each fall came a kick, a slap, a shove. The guards grabbed necks and pushed bodies into the sides of the buses as they forced the detainees forward. There was no blood, but the violence had rhythm, like a theater of fear. Considering the extremely polished propaganda video they put out about this, I would say that theater of fear is a great way to describe what's happening. Multiple families have begun to come forward as they are learning that their loved ones were rounded up and sent to El Salvador. Here are the names of the Venezuelans deported by the U.S. to El Salvador. U.S. officials have said 137 of the Venezuelan men were treated as enemy aliens and removed from the country under the 18th century law. The other 101 were deported under regular immigration procedures, the officials have said. Beyond that, the U.S. government has provided scant details about the deportations and has not publicly released the names of those sent to El Salvador. Family members and lawyers of deportees have said they only learned their loved ones or clients had been deported to the small Central American country through videos and photos posted by the Salvadorian government and news outlets. Propaganda video of the men being taken off the plane and their heads being shaved and thrown into this concentration camp was horrific enough, but I cannot imagine watching that and recognizing someone in the video. But that is what happened to this mother. Mother's shock as she recognizes deported son in El Salvador prison video. Photographer in the Time article mentioned a barber being brutalized. One family has come forward and said that their 26-year-old son is a barber who was coming to this country seeking asylum. He was detained because of a tattoo. The families of some of the men deported by the Trump administration to an El Salvador prison Saturday said not all of them are gang members. CBS News has learned that a barber from Venezuela was among those on the list for the deportation flights, even though documents show he has no criminal record. Franco Jose Caraballo Tiapa, 26, is from Venezuela and entered the U.S. in 2023, requesting asylum from persecution back home. The ICE guidelines mentions tattoos, and it's not like, oh, this person has a tattoo that explicitly says, hey, I'm a member of TDA. It's basically any tattoos on brown skin they see as a threat. One young man was thrown in the El Salvadorian gulag because he has an autism awareness tattoo. This is another one from Aaron. New at Mother Jones reports that one of the men renditioned to El Salvador is Neri Alvarado, who was working in Dallas as a baker. An ICE agent told him they were questioning all men with tattoos. Neri has an autism awareness tattoo in honor of his 15-year-old brother with autism. This man is a baker and he's a swim coach in Dallas, and now he is being brutalized in an El Salvadorian prison camp because he has a tattoo. Another one of the prisoners was a professional soccer player from Venezuela who was seeking asylum in the U.S. because of the threats and violence of the Maduro regime, and he also was taken in because of tattoos. This is from the court filings. Initially, Mr. Reyes Barrios was placed in maximum security at Otay Mesa and accused of being a Tren de Aragua gang member. The accusation is based on two things. First, he has a tattoo on his arm of a crown sitting atop a soccer ball with a rosary and the word Dios. DHS alleges that this tattoo is proof of gang membership. In reality, he chose this tattoo because it is similar to the logo for his favorite soccer team, Real Madrid. Second, DHS reviewed his social media posts and found a photo of Mr. Reyes Barrios making a hand gesture that they allege is proof of gang membership. In fact, the gesture is a common one that means I love you in sign language and is commonly used as a rock and roll symbol. Barrios spoke up publicly in Venezuela about Maduro and was attacked for that. So he fled to what he thought was a safe country, and now he has been shipped to a concentration camp in El Salvador because of a tattoo. The only criteria to sending these men away is racism. While we're on the subject of DHS and the El Salvadorian prison, we can't forget about DHS Secretary Kristi Noem and her lavish multi-million dollar, potentially billion-dollar trips all over the country and all over the world to posture as this anti-immigrant badass. He made another propaganda video from the El Salvadorian prison with a bunch of men stacked behind her as a backdrop.
Here at CECOT today and visiting this facility. And first of all, I want to thank El Salvador and their president for their partnership with the United States of America to bring our terrorists here and to incarcerate them and have consequences for the violence that they have perpetuated in our communities. I also want everybody to know, if you come to our country illegally, this is one of the consequences you could face. First of all, do not come to our country illegally. You will be removed and you will be prosecuted. But know that this facility is one of the tools in our toolkit that we will use if you commit crimes against the American people.
Utterly repulsive behavior from that woman. So much brutal stuff happening. Innocent parents who have been here for 35 years have been deported. Their children doing what they can to make their lives better in Colombia now. In Chicago, ICE has arrested 22 people as of a week ago. One of those was Julio Noriega, a 54-year-old born in Chicago, and he was just going to get pizza. Another Chicago father was picked up as he was bringing tamales home for his family. A mother in Milwaukee was deported to Laos despite having been born in Thailand because of a old weed charge. A Cuban man was grabbed in Miami by ICE as he was taking the trash out. He has been taken to a New Mexico facility because the one in Miami is overcrowded. Apparently, his wife is a U.S. citizen and he has spent years renewing work permits. And he also has severe bronchitis and, according to his wife, has not received care. People are being snatched off the streets and tortured, snatched out of their homes and tortured and thrown in overcrowded prisons. And at least the ones in America, Donald Trump and his cronies are profiting from. The one in El Salvador, we are paying for. Is also doubling down on the cruelty and ignoring court rulings, announcing that they will be revoking the legal status of 500,000 people from Cuba, Haiti, Nicaragua, and Venezuela. They're also deporting students. Mahmoud Khalil was disappeared about a month ago for leading pro-Palestinian protests, and just recently a Tufts University student, Ramaya Austurk, sorry if I mispronounced that, was snatched off the street for the crime of writing an op-ed in the university paper that called for the school to recognize the genocide in Gaza. This young woman was swarmed by ICE agents in the middle of broad daylight and taken off the street. And last I saw, she is in a ICE detainment center in Louisiana. Literally, the only crime she committed was writing an op-ed in a newspaper. That is all that they are pointing to. Concentration camps are here. The Gestapo is here. Just because they dress up in costumes like Kristi Noem doesn't mean they shouldn't be taken seriously. People are being disappeared off the streets with no accountability or oversight, while our president promises billionaires all over the world the Trump gold card. His Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick was on a podcast last week or the week before talking about all kinds of crazy stuff, including that if you don't get your Social Security check, you shouldn't complain, and people that do complain about that are just fraudsters. And he brought up the Trump gold cards.
John Paulson had a call with Donald Trump and was talking to Donald Trump and was kicking around the idea of we should sell, right? Why do we give away visas? We should sell them. And
why do we give away visas? We should sell them. So the wealthy will now have a fast pass to American protection, but the migrants and citizens who have been working and struggling and are contributing members of society get deported to El Salvador. Restaurant workers, barbers, mothers, fathers, artists, scientists are all being expelled while Trump brings in Russian oligarchs to bleed our country dry. Everyone needs to brush up on immigrant rights real quick. I will link to the ACLU's Know Your Rights page below. Vigilant out there, take care of each other, and like and subscribe to stay updated on all things Trump regime.